Coaches, today before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, CoachPad. No matter if you draw scout cards by hand or use a program on your computer, CoachPad will give you back time by never stuffing a binder again before heading out to practice. First 13.3-inch electronic device allowing coaches to clearly display scout cards outdoors in the sun has been a game changer for programs this past fall and those currently planning all across the country. This new technology allows coaches to coach and not the monotonous task of stuffing and dealing with binders on the practice field. Check out the CoachPad and CoachPad Mini on thecoachpad.com. Please make sure you check out our sponsors, our affiliates, and here is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have another great member of the Utica College football staff. He is the new defensive coordinator, Jamey McClendon, also known as Coach J-Mac. Coach, how you doing?
Good, Coach. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. It stopped raining, thankfully, and it's not too hot. So there isn't really much to complain about, except for it's supposed to rain for the next 6 days straight. So,
oh boy.
Yeah. It's not fun. But I mean, kind of how do you end up as the DC at Utica, Coach?
I played at Salisbury University on the East Shore of Maryland and played there, and I coached there for 2 years. When I was there, we were actually in the Empire 8, which is a conference that Utica's in. So when I saw that the defensive coordinator job was open, I was a little familiar with Utica. I didn't know how great this place was, to be honest with you, until I actually got here in the interview. I just knew it was a good program, and historically they do some really good things. And I never met Coach Fagiano before, but my head coach from Salisbury, Sherman Wood, I called him. He actually called and put my name, in the hat for the job. And Coach Fagiano and I, we talked on the phone. We met during the convention a little bit, and I came for the interview. And 2 days later, I was here working.
No. Like I said, I've had a bunch of guys on from Utica. Blaze has been fantastic and helped me get guys on, and he's just a good human being. We're going to talk defending the option a little bit, but kind of how has and we talked a little bit about before you came on, but how has that transition been for you from working at South Florida, working at UMass, Coastal, to kind of now you're back up in the Northeast still and kind of transitioning to D3, which is, obviously from a support perspective, there's a lot less support services and interns and stuff that you would have at that level. But from a football perspective and the transition to full-time DC, how has that been for you?
It's funny. Like that's a great question. I think, when I was at Salisbury as a football coach, I was a D-line coach and we didn't have football GA. So I worked at the Center for Student Achievement as well. That was my actual GA title. And then I just coached football on the side. Basically, I was a D-line coach. And then, I was like a GA or support staff guy for a really long time. And then, when my last year at UMass, I got promoted. I was the outside linebacker coach. That was my first full-time gig. And I think like all those experiences I had by having to wear like a whole bunch of hats as a GA and as a quality control guy and just being able to prioritize and execute a lot of tasks has really prepared me for this job. Because there's not a lot of support staff guys, but I think being able to figure out what's got to get done and put it in order of priority and be able to execute that list has really prepared me for this job. And I think I've been able to get that done here and to the best of my ability. But it's funny. It's like all the work I've done and just like doing all kinds of things, different things, at that level, you wear so many hats and then you get here where I'm the coordinator, but I also have to do this and do that and do that. And it's not an issue. It's fun because you're actually around the players more.
Yeah.
You got your hands on a lot more stuff. And, it's like a culminating activity of everything I've been doing. When I got hired, I told the players, and I meant this, everything I've done in my life has led me to this moment in front of you guys. Right. And everything they've done has led them to this moment in front of me. If that's good or bad, I don't know. We're going to find out together though, but it's been a lot of fun. And it's like I said, it's been good to be able to be involved in some stuff that I've never been involved with before. Like, like fundraising. Like myself and Coach Trabine, our offensive coordinator, we're going out to all these places in Utica and trying to, talk them up for donating whole signs for the golf tournament, and then we're becoming tight with like owners of these restaurants and bar. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. Fun is the best way to describe it, I think.
Good. Now, I mean, kind of the next thing is like you obviously, and I'm gonna butcher your college's last name and college's name. You played linebacker at Salisbury, and when we talked on the phone, like I mean, obviously Dan Carroll kind of recommended you and said you'd be good, so and so, and kind of one thing you talked about was defending the option and just in practice because obviously, I mean, you played linebacker, you had to play some scout defense, and
Oh yeah.
and Salisbury does a really good job at running the option. They just do. That's I mean, there's no secret behind that. So kind of what was that experience like? And then kind of what did that experience teach you kind of as you went into the coaching profession?
Yeah, so my last 2 years at Salisbury, I was a pretty good player. I did a good job. I really just did my job, and I just did about my best ability and made some good plays, had some good accolades. But my first year, my freshman year, I stunk. I was not a good football player. I just wasn't ready, and I was on the. And there's nothing wrong with being on the scout team. That's not why I was on the scout team. There are guys better than me, obviously. But um, I just it sounds funny, but like just playing against it every single day, I would learn to look at the slot or learn to look at this or learn to look at that. And I always knew I was doing a good job, or at least I kind of had an idea of what was happening when the OC would always come threaten to cut me, right? Like have someone cut block me, right? That's how you know you're making it on the scout team versus triple option. When hey, we're gonna cut you, you do that again, right? So um that really was like a great thing for me. And I never really thought about it before until I got to Coastal. We started playing against like the Citadel and Kennesaw State, and like just remembering those things like really helped us rule some stuff up. And like we all worked together obviously on it, but like I just remember like I want to look at that guy. Why is that? Well, when I looked at that guy, I was always getting yelled at for doing the wrong thing, right? Or like that's what they wanted me to do, so they got the playoff on scout team. And it sounds funny, but it did help me, I think, in some degree of playing against it. And I don't know if fortunate is the right word. I think it is, but some people probably wouldn't agree. But everywhere I've been on a defensive staff that's had to prepare for the triple option. And we played against them, played them well, and beat them. And some other times I've learned some very hard lessons about the triple with what not to do. Like one example, outnumber them to the field to force them to run to the boundary. Well, that's great because they're definitely going to run to the boundary. You better have a plan when they do it, though. You better have some answers because they're definitely going to run there, right? So like things like that, just. And I was lucky at Coastal because I worked when I was there. Joe Mowgli was the head football coach. And, he was the CEO of TD Ameritrade, and he always had us thinking. Challenged us to think outside of the box and to look at things from a different perspective. And I was like 24 when I was there, and it was such a great experience at that age to like really learn from some things that worked really well, but really learn from things that didn't work well and make notes about it to remember for the future. And like having like video clips of why you can't do certain things versus different looks, if that makes sense. So it's been like I said, we've done at some place I've been, we've done some great things. Some place I've been, we really struggled against it. But I think at the end of the day, when you play a triple team, they're always going to be better at running their triple option offense than you will be at running your triple option defense.
Yeah.
Like it just is what it is. And that's okay. Right. So the challenge of putting together your triple option defense, whatever it is, right, is whatever structure front you want to run, whatever fits your personality and what fits your personnel, right? It's got to be something that you can execute on game day and you can practice, right? And it's simple, and it's simple for the players, but it's simple for the coaches to make adjustments too, because whatever you ran, that they have a. Oh, you're in a 4-4-1 high. Let me pull out the 4-4-1 high call sheet. Oh, you're in bear. Let me pull out the bear call sheet. Oh, you're in a 50 front. Let me pull out the 50. You know what I mean? So they've seen it all, right? So the challenge is preparing the kids to read their keys and play sound football, but where it's as the coaches, you have an idea of what you're going to get, so you can plan it and you can bank reps and practice versus it. That I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, and like two points to what your answer is. There's one, the Coastal head coach you work for, because I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name. I'll butcher it.
I got you, Coach Mowgli.
His book is one of my favorite books I've read. It's actually sitting in my classroom. So
Really?
yes, I
Oh
love that
man.
book. I mean, it's a very inspiring story on kind of coaching, then taking time for your family, and then come back to coaching, which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Second part of that is to your point, you can, as much as you want to try, you're never going to be able to replicate that look in practice.
No,
I
no.
mean, unless you're Army, Navy, or Air Force, you're not replicating that. I mean, you just can't. There's no. I love it when I've ran either double wing or some sort of triple in high school, and watching in pregame, watching the opposing team try to replicate. It's one of the best experiences when you run an under center offense. Is
Oh
trying to
man.
watch, especially that has heavy motion. Just watching people try to replicate that because it's terrible. Now, if you see people that don't like either just don't run it or just walk through it, you usually know you're in trouble because those are the smart coaches that have kind of figured out how to deal with that. But yeah,
Yeah. It's a like Georgia Tech, when we played Georgia Tech when I was in South Florida, I think it was 18. It was Paul Johnson's last year. You look down the line at Indy, and they're doing like D-line get-offs.
yeah.
They're like running off the ball, cutting bags and stuff in Indy. And I told D-line goes, "Hey man, don't look down there, bro.
now,
Don't look down there."
now, how have those experiences helped you? Like, and let me rephrase that. How has that? How's the experiences of coaching against the Paul Johnsons at UMass? I know you guys weren't independent, so I think you had like
We played Army last year, and
you played
you know,
Army. Coastal
UMass
has
plays Army for like the next 10 years, I think, something crazy like that.
Coastal has obviously their current version of the gun triple,
Sure.
and that's obviously a little different. And then you've coached and played against a bunch of schools that run it. How is that? How is your ideology and how to defend it evolved over the course of that time as you've played more schools that run it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think the most I've obviously learned is like when we didn't play well against it, and you go back and you watch the film and you can see like, one year, I'm not going to say any teams or anywhere I was, but like one year we ran a bubble and a three technique, and we liked the way that looked in practice. And then all of a sudden, you start looking at the plays they're going to run and you start preparing. You have every single play in their playbook they have, right? Every three technique play, every bubble play, like everything, anything they want to run, they can run, right? So like that, that told me like, okay, you got to take something away, right? Try to limit their playbook to the best of your knowledge, at least, right? What you see on film, right? So when we played Georgia Tech, I remember we went back. Like I had cut ups that I made from YouTube. Like I would put YouTube clips from like 2012 on the system of a similar look, because at the end of the day, they're going to run what they run versus what they run. And it's fun too, seeing the different personalities of the triple option guys, in terms of, you know, how dynamic they are with their formations, or, you know, how they get to a three-man surface, or, some of the answers are different based on who's calling it, like every other offense, right? But I think like it's nice when you beat them and you got a good plan. But even when you beat them, like, when I was at South Florida, we had a pretty good plan. I thought we won the game, but we scored 2 kickoff returns on touchdown as well, right? So that helped a little bit. I'd be lying if I didn't say it didn't help a lot of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but just being able to watch it and really like have a good self evaluation and not think, oh, this is a great plan. Like, this kid did it wrong, right? No, like the rules of the defense is what it's based off. So if kids doing it wrong, like all we're telling the kids all week or the players all week is like, hey, do what we're telling you to. Read your key and react based on whatever it is. So like if it's not working, it's you as the coach. Your rules are messed up, right? Like, so you got to figure out a better way to get the players to execute what you want them to do based on whatever they're looking at versus the triple. So, but yeah, definitely a lot of learning with the when we got ran out of the gym.
Oh
But
no, I've been there, coach. Like, I mean, the interesting thing about defending the option, you're either going to do really well or you're going to do really bad. There is no like in between
yeah,
with it defending. It just doesn't happen. Now, for like coaches who are haven't experienced defending the option, or by the time this comes out, know they're going to have an option team and they're starting to prep for it for next season. Like, what do you think is a good starting point for defending the option, or what maybe some coaches should look for? Because obviously, not every option in offense is the same. But where do you kind of start from a base level at when you're preparing for one and kind of looking at, okay, this is foundationally at least what we need?
Yeah, I think the first thing, honestly, I look at is the quarterback, just like every other offense. But, who is their best player, right? Is the quarterback the best player? Is the fullback their best player? Is one of the slots their best player, right? Like when it's go time, who at the end of the day has got to get the ball? Like if they're going to run a design run, who they want to handle the ball? If it's a quarterback, that's when in my opinion, that's when those teams are really rolling, obviously, right? Because that opens up the playbook a lot. If it's the fullback, right, and you take the dive away on the triple phase or however you want to describe it, like now they're going to run some plays where they're going to find a way to get the fullback the ball because he's the guy, right? If it's the slot, one year, I forget what year it was, I forget what team it was too, but they were doing a lot of like trap with the slot, right, with the A back, because that was the most dynamic guy in the field for them, right? So they were just finding a way to get him the ball, and it was good stuff. It's tough to stop, obviously, but like who is the guy, right? Who is the matchups, and then the next thing I would do is when I watch the film, like I would try to find. I think you need to watch like similar structures, right? If you're going to be like a 4-4-1 high team versus it, you should be trying to watch film versus 4-4-1 high, right? And then the next level would be the front, right? If you're playing 2-3s or 2-2-eyes or whatever you're doing, like you need to watch that film to get an idea of really not the calls that you need, but the answers you're going to need, right? So they insert the slot, like what is your answer for that? How are you going to respond to that? Like, and then how are they messing with the coverage alignments, right? So if you're a too high team, right, what are they going to do to mess with your safeties? They're going to change the formation. Are they going to go crazy motion and play action pass, knowing the way you're playing those guys on the pitch, whatever it is, right? So, who is their best player, and then what are their answers for similar structures, right? Traditionally they're going to run the true triple, right, versus the bubble, and they're going to run midline versus the 3 technique, right? So, like, always start there with your front, right? Like that's the first play you got to stop. And what happened in my experience, at least, is like we would do a good job stopping the triple plays, right? But then all of a sudden they get into double option plays, and now they're blocking extra guys. And one thing I learned, this is from being on scout team, is like whatever defense you put together, it's a gotta win defense. Somebody is going to have to win, right? So like they run double option. Now one of your linebackers has got to win, right? It's full flow. You got to go, right? Things like that. So like, what are their answers to what you want to run, right? Like what are their base plays, and what are things they're going to do to try to mess with your rules, right? Where they fake motion the slot, like motion him this way and run triple back the other way, right? Like if you're playing zero, a lot of people play true zero coverage with the safeties, which you can do. There's nothing, you can do whatever you want, right? But I've seen on film like guys like run into each other because the slots go 2 different ways. You know, so it's just figure again, who's their best player, what is their personnel like, and then how are they attacking a similar structure, and then what are their answers, what are their change ups for that structure.
Okay. Now, on top of that, now obviously high school is a little different on what we can do and when we can do stuff, depending on whether you have spring ball or not. When do you start worrying about option rules, your option defense? Do you start that stuff in the spring? Do you start that stuff early in the camp? Because I know, like, I mean, it depends on who you talk to, but I know some people that know they have Army or Navy on their schedule, for example, will do like a period every week, at least once a week. They'll spend like a whole dedicated day in fall camp. And then obviously the week of, you're hitting that full go. When do you and how do you kind of approach when to practice it, when to mess with stuff throughout the year? Obviously, week 1, it's a little easier. You can spend most of your August on that. But if they're not, where do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, I think like if you have spring ball, you should work on it during spring ball if you know you're playing it, no matter when it is. One, you want to teach your rules, but 2, you want to get the defense on film so you can teach off the stuff. They can see what you want, what you expect. So I do think you need to start in the spring if you have that ability. It doesn't need to be a ton, right? But I mean, if I would like to do it at least once a day for at least 10 minutes. And if it's not working on the triple, it's working on like, excuse me, maybe like a triple circuit, right? So it's working on defeating the cut block, or it's working on being the pitch player, or whatever the case is, right? Finding a way to work some concept that helps with the triple. But I think every day, like 10 minutes would be great. Some guys won't do that at least once a week, worst case scenario. Because again, you want to get stuff on film and you want to be able to teach the kids the base rules of the defense. And to me, it helps overall defense because it all goes back to the option, right? Like you talk about zone read bubble and all this stuff. Like when I was at Coastal, we played the Citadel my first year there, and we played them game one, and we worked the triple like all training camp. We worked it for the first week, obviously, and that season, our corners, I'm telling you, if it was unbalanced, our corners went over versus every offense. Like sometimes we even realized it was unbalanced, right?
Yeah.
When it was tackle over, there were games where people did tackle over versus us, normal offense, and we had no idea in the box because our D line just knocked the front because that's what they were doing versus triple. So like, it's just it's great stuff for normal defense as well, right? And it's teaching your kids the fundamentals of defense, whatever your rules are. Like you don't have to bring the corners over if you don't want to, but that's just an example. But and then during the season, if you play in them late, I I think you got to find a way to work on it. Um, at least once a week, if not once a week. Like we used to do it on Sunday practice or your Monday, whatever your day after the game practice was. We would do it for like 10 or 15 minutes on that day. It's a lighter day. You don't have the whole game plan done yet. So we would focus like 10 to 15 minutes every Sunday or Monday, whatever your schedule is, on the triple. Just so it stays fresh in their mind. Right. Just so it stays fresh. And again, you're just creating teach tapes, and then the challenge, some places I've been, the challenge wasn't practicing it on Sunday or finding a day during the season to do it if you play them later, but the challenge was watching it with the coaches, right? All of us like wanting to watch it and figure it out, because what would happen, right, is you're done with it, then you get into your game plan for the next week, which is obviously the priority. Don't get me wrong, but I think you really got to like make sure if you're doing that, you schedule, even if it's just 10 minutes to buzz through it with the staff. So like at least someone's taking notes and know like when we get to that week, hey, we got to get these addressed, right? We got to get these fixed because like the next game is the most important game, right? Like that's obvious, but like that was always an issue for us. Places I've been, like we work on it during the season, but like all of a sudden the week of, we'll watch a whole cut up of every Sunday practice, triple option prep, and like there's a bunch of stuff we got to get fixed. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, kind of building off that is, from my experience and watching high school teams and how they react to it. And I don't know, kind of what would your recommendation be? Because I've seen a lot of high school teams rotate heavily or over rotate to the motion. What is kind of your opinion on to whether rotate, not rotate, and so forth?
Yeah, I think like it depends on your structure, right? If you're going to be a one high team or a two high team, like if you're a two high team, you know, I would be pretty patient until the a lot of guys, when the guy starts the motion, right? So these are the slots. This guy starts the motion. That safety just starts to roll. And when
Yeah.
he starts to roll too soon, that's when you get all the twirl motion, right? And the counter option back the other way, because now he's really lost his leverage, right? If you rule it up, you know, where that backside safety is an extra player, you don't need him to go too fast, right? And it's all to me what he's looking at. Like if you're a two high structure, I believe in reading the slots, right? Key in the slot. The slot's going to tell you what to do. He's going to arc if it's too high. He's going to load if it's one high. And there's always variations and things change, game plan stuff. But that's essentially the deal, right? Then he's going to insert, right? He'll base the end on dive, and there's some other things. But then on the other side, there's a motion, right? So it's orbit motion, twirl motion, right? No motion, whatever else there is that someone might do. But like getting the safeties keyed in on that motion, on what play's coming. When you rotate too fast or you rotate pre-snap based on the motion, they're going to get you back the other way. And, some people be like, well, yeah, we want them to run back that way. Be careful now, because they're going to run it back the other way. You got to be able to make the play on it, right? So until the ball is snapped or until that slot, the A-back crosses the center, I don't see the backside safety having to go too far, So place I've been when we play against a triple, we have a dive player, a quarterback player, an alley player, and then the pitch player. That's how we defined it. So the dive player tackles the dive, right? The quarterback player was the inside piece of the quarterback, right? So he's usually like, if it's a 3 down front, like a 40 front, he'd be the overhang. right? So he has time to let the quarterback get to his outside. So he wants to be the inside piece, right? The alley player is the guy who's probably getting blocked most of the time by the tackle veering up or the slide, however they do it. He's the outside piece of the quarterback to the inside piece of the pitch. So if you saw the arc block, he'd be the inside piece of the arc, right? And your pitch player is the outside piece of the arc, right? So everywhere I've been, we've been able to define those rules, right? Where the backside safety is not involved in one of those four, right? So like if it was a, you see this okay?
Yeah, you're perfect, coach.
Right. So they ran like midline triplet, or they used to curl on it, right?
Yeah.
Something like this, right? So he would be the dive player, right? He would be the quarterback player. He'd be the pitch player. And we want this guy to be the alley player.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how we would design it, where this guy, he don't have to be, a lot of 2 high teams make this guy the alley player.
Yeah.
And he's running over there. One, it's a hard tackle. Like that's a long stride tackle now. But also that really opens up, with this kind of stuff, right? Based on what their keys are and what they're doing. But like this guy, the alley player, he got to win, right? He got to win. Now, with this guy being the inside piece of the quarterback player, he can really get his hands on this tackle and help this guy get over the top, right? Because it's okay if the quarterback gets outside him. He's an inside piece anyways. That's fine, right? Yeah. Once he gets outside, hopefully the Will, right, or whoever that guy's, the alley player, is running and tracking that quarterback down. If he pitches it, now you got one inside the load, one outside the load, or the arc, or whatever the structure is. But so like every time, no matter what structure I've been a part of, we've tried to define it like that, right? Dive, quarterback, alley, pitch. And then if it's double option, right? So let's say it's full flow and the fullback's out right now. Now that backside backer, whoever it is, now he's got to go too. You need an extra guy. They're bringing a guy to the party. We got to bring a guy to the party.
Perfect, coach. I mean, kind of continue with that is, which option plays have given you guys, and it doesn't matter the structure, but like, which one are you like, well, I hope they don't run this well, or this gets the stress? Because I've talked to a lot of option coaches this offseason, and that have come out this fall. It's like, I know there's a contingent that really love inside veer. There's a contingent that I've had like 2 of them quote to me directly, like, outside veer solves all your problems. Some people just really hate midline because it just hits so dang fast. Which one do you kind of like, well, that's just a pain and messes with our rules, or just causes some stress?
I think outside veer or wide veer, like that puts a lot of stress on the overhang, like a 3 down or like a bear look, because you're telling him he's a quarterback player. But once they double that and they run double the 3 or the 4-eye, whatever, they double him. Now he's really the dive player. He's a first threat player.
Yeah.
Right? So he's got to know based on, it gets a little hairy in there. Like he's really the C-gap player, right? That's what the quarterback, he's the C-gap player, right? So that gets a little hairy. The play that, like, when I watch people get smoked on, in my opinion, is not an option play, it's trap.
Yeah.
That trap play, man, when that thing hits, that thing is out the gate 88. If an option play, I think outside veers are really, like, defensively, it creates some stress if you don't coach, if you think they're going to run outside veer, right, and you coach up the quarterback player as the C-gap player as the first threat, so if the dive's in your lap, right, but if you're not prepared for it, that play can really mess with your rules, really mess with your rules. But that trap play, man, that thing hits pretty good, man. That trap play's good.
Fast. Yeah.
Belly G, that's another one that hits good when it hits, but yeah, outside veer is a pain. If you don't really have a plan for it and prepare for it, and, like, because the player's in conflict, right? He's thinking he's a quarterback player, but he's really got to tackle the dive. The dive's hitting the C-gap now, right? So, sometimes I've seen too, like, if you go tackle over, like if you're like a 3 down front, and you go tackle over, and all of a sudden there's a bubble, right? If you knock the front, there could be a bubble. But now you got all your bubble plays over there that you haven't worked on all week, right? So what I've seen, what's been stressful for places I've been, and what I've seen on film at least, is like when you can manipulate their front with, like, tackle over or whatever, however you want to do it, 3-man surface, right? and you can create like a bubble or create a 3 technique if you're not going to have a 3 technique, whatever the opposite is. Now you can run those plays that we didn't get a chance to prepare for all week. You know, that's tough. That's stressful. But again, on the flip side, as a defensive guy, like if you create sound rules, right, based on their key reads, based on whatever, and it's a simple defense for all the coaches to make adjustments on game day, you should be able to get some adjustment done, in my opinion, to handle that, right? But sometimes you get these rules and you start creating rules during the week, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of rules and like you don't remember them all, and then that's not good.
Speaking of rules and structures, which structure, so 1 high, 2 high, odd versus even front, kind of gives you the best, or let me rephrase that, least boom or bust potential? Like which one would, I mean, not again, as we've said, they have answers for everything, and you are going to have change ups and adjustments because they'll just adjust and bludgeon you to death. But like what from a base foundational point, because you've coached in multiple structures and fronts, what from a base perspective for like high school coaches could be a good starting point structure, 1 high, 2 high, odd versus even versus just a general triple team that might have trap in, that might have some sort of belly in?
Yeah. I think the 2 high structure is pretty simple to install and teach, and the rules are pretty simple. Because at the end of the day, it's basically quarters, right? Like,
Yeah.
I work with some offensive guys who tag quarters as 0 because that's how they see it. You know what I mean? It's basically quarter defense, and a lot of guys run quarters. If you're like a whatever your structure is in normal defense, like if you're a 2 high team, I would say the 2 high shell would be the easiest to turn into your option defense, right? If you're a 1 high structure team, that might be simpler, but I say 1 high, it's just the alley player is the post guy, right? He's running the alley.
Yeah.
It ain't no if it's passed, I don't know if he's gonna get there or not, right? So I think the 2 high structure protects you a little bit on the play action. It's probably the simplest to install, especially if you're a 2 high team. The 1 high, I like it a lot structurally, but there's some things you got to work through with the overhangs on pass, right? So like, are you going to play man on those guys? Or are you going to switch it off between the post player? Like if they run option, is the overhang going to take the pitch and the post player's checking for the vertical concept? Or, it's easier to get those adjustments done, in my opinion. Easier is not the right word. Simpler, right? In a 2 high concept.
Okay. And then the last question I got for you before we go is kind of, do you have any final thoughts or suggestions for people looking to defend the option, especially for like the high school coach?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is like, figure out who their best player is, right? Is it the quarterback? Is it the fullback? Is it the slot, right?
Yeah.
Like that's who they're going to try to get the ball to, right? That's who they're going to try to get the ball to. The next thing I would say is if they're going to run a lot of triple or double option, get the ball to the pitch face, right? Get the ball to the pitch face. To me, that's where the largest amount of turnovers come from, right? Is off a bad pitch, or just a lot of stuff can happen. It takes a while to get all the way to the pitch face. And then, the last thing I would say is make sure you're picking a defense that you feel like your personnel matches, right? Like, if you got 5 guys, 5 D linemen who are better than their O linemen, then play bear, right? Like if you feel you can just cover them guys up, that's a great idea, right? If you're worried about your D linemen, maybe that's not the answer. I don't know, but it's all about your personnel, right? And what structure fits what they do. If you're a 2 high team, if you're a quarters team, then the 2 high, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you're a 3 down team and you got a dude that knows, like I like covering the center up versus the triple teams, right? Like cover them up, do what you do, but just have rules that are sound versus the triple and your players can execute, right? So it's their personnel, your personnel, and like just having. Someone told me this the other day, it made a lot of sense. Don't just have calls, right? Have answers. That's what they're going to have, right? And like you don't have to do it all the time, but as a coordinator, you got to play a game in your head, right? Right. If they do start running this, what am I going to do? What is my answer? It might never happen, but at least in your head, it's fresh and you have an idea. of an answer for that, right? Because that's what they're going to have. They're going to have answers, and they're going to do all kinds of things, right? They know more about your defense than you do, probably, right? Structurally.
Yeah.
So know their personnel, pick a structure that matches your personnel, and just have a really sound plan that you feel comfortable and the kids feel confident about.
Perfect, Coach. Coaches, give Coach a follow on Twitter. His Twitter will be in the bio. Like, share, subscribe, all that lovely jazz. Check out our sponsor, CoachPad. There are links in the bio. Otherwise, that was an episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Coach, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you, bro. Really, really fun talking to triple. A lot of people don't like to talk triple, man. I like talking to triple.